Good evening and welcome everyone to the remote meeting of the Air Planning Board and the Air Conservation Commission. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Baker issued an emergency order temporarily suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Public bodies otherwise governed by the open meeting law are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate alternative means. This meeting will be broadcast live on Channel 8 and on Zoom. Public may participate remotely following the call-in information on the bottom of the live broadcast screen. For Zoom meeting information relating to remote participation, please contact Joanne Kristoff, Conservation Administrator, at concom@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8249, or Cindy Knox, IT Director, at cknox@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8252 prior to the meeting. The Planning Board members that are with us this evening are, let's see, we have Ken Diskin, who is a Vice Chair. Jonathan Krantz is the Clerk. I don't see anyone else.
Yes, and we received an email from Jeff saying that he couldn't make it because of a previous commitment.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you. And members of the Conservation Commission that are in attendance this evening are Jenna Maya, member, George Bacon, member, Chester Gino, clerk and member, Mark Phillips, vice chair, and myself, John Schmallenberger, chair.
And then we also have two town personnel here as well.
We have Mark Archambault and who else?
Oh, come on.
Gee, thanks, John.
Oh. I'm so used to seeing you. I'm sorry.
Your esteemed administrator and agent.
And I apologize.
That's okay.
No, that was horrible.
One question, this was posted for both boards. I'll be taking minutes for conservation. Would that suffice for covering planning board as well?
Would for me.
Works for me. Mark, you're muted.
I'm going to say Heather will be looking at the tape, so to speak, of this, the recording, and she will, take some minutes. But I think having somebody transcribe a little bit more detail of the discussion might be useful, as Jess has offered. So that would help Heather to also do an independent planning board set. So thank you, Jess.
You're welcome. The pen is ready.
Okay. May I suggest a working process for this meeting?
Sure.
Okay. Given that we only have an hour, I don't think it's realistic that we could do a forced, march through the list of items. That was sent in advance, and I hope that everyone has a chance to review, has had a chance to review and look at those. And they were created with the intention that all voices be heard and that they could serve as a foundation or a reference for this meeting, but they don't necessarily dictate the terms of the meeting. As I understand it, what's really important this evening is there's really two issues. It's about communications and process. And I think there are issues that have been raised regarding communications and about the process. And the point of this gathering together is to say, what could we do that would be satisfactory to all parties involved that would improve both of those things? A clarity of how the process works, and also about improving communications between the two bodies. What I suggest then is this, what I propose is this, that everyone get a chance for about a minute just to speak what their top level concerns are. So instead of going through the list, each of us would have a chance to say, what do they think is important? And after we do that in turn, What I'd also like to recommend is a discussion of process. I know that Mark has outlined a kind of way that we could look at OSRDs, for example, step by step in order, and that might be an excellent way to start. And I defer to Mark if he feels that that would be a good thing to do. I think that would be helpful, and it certainly wouldn't exclude CONSCOM in any way whatsoever. But I thought that because Mark has already prepared a kind of list and has been thinking about it, that we could turn to him as a start for that discussion of what makes sense in terms of order. And of course, I'd love to hear CONSCOM either respond to it or add to it or edit it, however, or react to it. If we're going to, in the spirit of talking about what's most important, if you don't mind, I'd like to go first. And I want to say that on the whole, I'm actually quite pleased. I don't feel a great sense of that things are terrible in the least. I actually think things are quite good, and I am especially impressed with the depth that the Conservation Committee has gone through in the examination of properties in advance as part of the OSRD process. What I do feel is difficult is understanding the process and order and sequence, and any clarity on that would be helpful, because I'm sure, as everyone who's attending knows, there are a lot of moving pieces in these OSRDs, and getting that sense of sequence down can be tricky, especially since for the Conservation Committee members who may not know. So what happens on our end at Air Planning Board is that once the preliminary plan is submitted, we have 45 days really to review and make a decision, unless we request for an extension. But 45 days is the governing rule before constructive approval. Well, actually, I don't think that would apply here. Before it gets approved, and then the definitive. And I just want to remind everyone that the definitive is the important one, because regardless of whether the planning board approves or rejects the preliminary, the applicant still has a definitive. And regardless of whatever the decision made on the preliminary, the applicant is free to submit whatever on the definitive. That can happen. But so we have 90 days on the definitive. So that's the context of the process, are these timelines. Those are my concerns, and I would like to turn this over to a member of the Conservation Commission to volunteer their top ones. And Jess, would you be
I don't
willing?
want to go first, but I was just going to mention to John that when we were talking the other day, setting up this meeting, we had thought it was probably a good idea for Jonathan to run most of the structure, because going through the list. So we don't have a planning board chair here, so is that okay with you, John?
Oh, sure, of course.
Thank you, Jess.
The reason I don't want to go first is I don't want to step on anybody else on my commission before they have a chance to speak.
John, would you like to go?
Well, I know the OSRD process is fairly new to all of us.
Mhm.
And we are all in the process of learning how to do it. And I'll be 100% honest with you. I'm not that clear on a lot of the aspects of the OSRD. And right or wrong, I've been depending on our agent, Joanne Christoph, for guidance and clarity. So I'm here to learn. But having said that, communication, working together, making this thing move more smoothly between the two boards, and just working for the common good, get this thing done and as quickly as possible, as easily as possible. So I guess the process and the communications are like you say, the two of the best or the most important aspects of this.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Since there are more members of the Conservation Commission than there are of the Air Planning Board, I was originally intending to go back and forth when I thought about this, but there's only two of us here from APB. So if you don't mind, I was going to invite another voice from Conscom to speak up, if that's acceptable to you.
I'd prefer as many of them speak, but
Perfect.
I'd also think that and I agree with what John said, it's new. Part of what I was going to say is that the fact that it's new, but I definitely do not want to exclude Mark and Joanne from the discussion because
Nor I.
they are the driving force in the communication part and represent the professionals in the room. So
Yep. And now, you know what? I forgot to say, I was hoping that the board members would speak and then we turn it over to Mark and Joanne would have the opportunity. And I
Okay.
neglected to say that. But
Thank
thank you, Ken. That's exactly right. And I certainly would not want to neglect the voices. So of the 4 remaining conscom, who would like to go next, please?
No, I can.
Jennifer, please.
Yeah, Jen, please.
Jen.
So I kind of echo what John said. I'm still really trying to understand this process. And one of my main concerns is really just understanding the correct word's failing me, but kind of the power. So if we give a recommendation or we give our thoughts on a project, what does that actually mean? When some of the planning board members were at Conservation Commission a few meetings ago now, I remember a comment of if the plans fit on the space, then you all have to approve it. So I kind of feel that if that's truly the case, then what does our opinion really matter? Case, so I really want to understand kind of the jurisdiction and how much importance you can put on our recommendations.
That's a question I have as well. That's really important to me that I'm very confused about is how we translate the recommendations into actual action. What do they materially mean as we review the documents? And what's our authority to say, I'm sorry, but this is extending it to high priority areas. This is not acceptable. And that's a very confusing thing for me as well, Jennifer. Jen.
Thank you.
Who else would like to go?
So, Jonathan, I think the main thing is, again, we had stated once before, what the Conservation Commission actually has jurisdiction over, and that being the wetlands themselves and the buffer itself. Now, things that are, natural heritage and things like that, we don't actually have that authority. And again, I think in some of the emails that I had seen from Jess, she had kind of laid out, again, the basic understanding that I think we all have, right, of at least what Conservation Commission's, Conservation Commission's part in the OSRD is. And I guess I'm fairly comfortable with how that's laid out right now. Again, and just to summarize, right, the applicant applies, provides a conservation analysis. We review that analysis with our agent, go through it, identify things after our site walk occurs that we feel are definitely the priority areas, and we make that recommendation to APB as you indicated, and even taking into account, as Jen noted, if it fits, we have to approve. That's fine, and I think you folks it puts you in a position where you've been provided a recommendation. You can by our commission, you can take it or leave it, but I guess at the end of the day, you're looking for us for some of that expertise, right? And that's great. And we obviously greatly appreciate that. But regardless of what you guys do approve, and I think George had brought this up once before, we then will discuss with the applicant, what can and cannot be done within those lot lines. I think is kind of how you play. You mentioned it, right, George? So each lot will have to come forth and be reviewed as to what's acceptable, what's not acceptable.
But only those lots that have wetlands or buffer zone.
right.
Oh, correct. Yes. Sorry, Jess. Right. Yeah. So if it's something that's totally upland, yeah, they can do, I guess, like, again, whatever they want, I suppose, within the bounds of what you guys possibly approve. And there's probably certain things that you folks are looking for that, again, the Conservation Commission, would possibly put a blind eye to, let's say. And in respect to how the OSRD was put together, I was new as it was being developed, but from how I saw it go through, it seemed acceptable. And again, I thought it provided APB with enough information to make as best of an educated, decision as they could on, submitted plans. And so I've been comfortable with it up until now. It seems though that the APB maybe has a little uncomfort with, the authority, the decision-making power that's placed on them, and be it they don't want to get it wrong, or they're concerned that they might be played out as a bad guy or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what, but I don't think the rest of the commission, or obviously we can go through. I don't think the rest of us would be overly concerned about having a larger role. I just don't know how we would apply that larger role based on what we're given jurisdiction over. So that's where I have a little bit of confusion, conflict, and concern, obviously.
Thank you, Mark.
Jonathan, if I
Yes, sir.
may address a few things and give a little bit of background. The OSRD section, just like the rest of the bylaw, was developed by a planning consultant, Judy Barrett. And, I would say that overall, the zoning bylaw that we obtained from her is far superior to what the town of Ayer had before. That being said, we found in the first two subdivisions that there were aspects of what she wrote that weren't serving us too well, I think because Ayer has such small underlying lot sizes throughout most of its area, the A2 district with 12,000 square feet. Many towns that use OSRD have, a 1 acre minimum lot size or 40,000 square feet, some have 80,000 square feet. And so in those circumstances, a little bit of a difference in density or number of units might not seem to make as much difference, but in the case of Ayer, it's readily apparent. So for instance, we discovered last year that the formula that she had in there to determine the number of base units was very generous, and it didn't really work out realistically in terms of the math that was provided. So we said, we're going to go to a yield plan, which will show us how many base lots we can get based on what you can do with a real plan, with a real conventional subdivision that meets all the standards of the underlying zoning. So why I'm mentioning that is I believe that this process needs to be tightened, and there needs to be a little bit more descriptive guidance as far as the timing of things in the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board. And whoops, I thought there was somebody else. What is?
Mark, I think all that's well said. I would say before we go into deep dive in the weeds, I'd like to continue going around so that everyone is heard. And then I certainly want to circle back to this idea that maybe some of the recommendations need to be expressed as prescriptions, which requires amendments to the bylaw that we may need to be discussed.
But before, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on the whole, the guidance thing, right? The conservation analysis, which is prepared by the applicant or the applicant's consultant, is something that both the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission get. And the way the bylaw is written, it envisions the Planning Board working in consultation with the Conservation Commission to come up with something. And the way it's worked in practice is the Conservation Commission has, taken the study done by the consultant and sort of derived recommendations to give to the Planning Board out of that. And I think some of the concern with some of the Planning Board members in the past is they felt that those recommendations were a little bit too vague and not specific enough. But what makes it a little difficult is, Planning Board cannot say you cannot develop in this area if for there's no other zoning or site issue that would constrain that. So for instance, if you recommend that we preserve the entire NHESP area, in this case of this new subdivision, I think that's a great idea, but legally the Planning Board can't say, no development, no touch in that area unless they find that the Blandings turtles are nesting in there, or there's some, really good reason why those lots aren't viable. So that's what constrains the planning board, is we have to look at the state law and the zoning bylaw and all the regulations. And if a lot basically meets all of our standards, we're kind of hard pressed to deny it. But we can try to work with the applicant to get a better design, which we have. And so far it's worked out, even though it's been a little rough at times. And so I'll be quiet now.
Thank you. I was wondering if we could do George, Ken, and then Jess. Would that be fair? And then we'll talk to Joanne, and then we'll give Joanne and Mark a chance. Would that be a good process?
Yep.
George, is there something you'd like to say or like to assert?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I just have one question for the planning boys. In these past 3 projects that we've done, can you be a little more specific about what you felt you weren't getting from us? I mean, because I really don't know what you're looking for.
I can answer
Okay, I'll let Ken do that. Okay, good.
that. Am I next on the discussion anyway? I'll just go ahead, but if
Is
you
it
want.
okay, George? Is it okay?
I frankly think that the whole process has been working quite well. And I think the recommendations that we've got from the Conservation Commission have been very adequate and very well thought out. So I actually, and I'm looking at trying to look at things a little bit differently. And my new term that I mentioned to Jonathan offline is big picture. So a little bit of everybody, what everyone has said, including Mark Ashenbo and John, is that this is all new to all of us. In the last 3 years, the town of Ayer has upgraded their subdivision regulations, which is a subset of the OSRD, which is the open space, residential development. There's a subset of that called subdivision regulations, which is how you construct things and the real minutia of the projects. We've updated our stormwater regulations. We've updated our wetland regulations. In essence, the town has done a lot of steps in the right direction. And it's interestingly enough, this particular project, I know we're not going to talk about projects in particular, but just quickly, the current project that's under review is the first project that will fall under all those new regulation changes that we've had. So I believe that this process has worked well. And it's very ironic that the 3 OSRDs have all landed in the same mathematical zone called A2, which is the 12,000 square foot minimum size zone. So if you take a big picture look, you'll see they're in 3 different parts of town, not too close, but in essence, 3 different pieces of town, 3 different sets of land, 3 different kinds of wetlands conditions. So I don't think it can be any better than that, is what I'm getting at. I think we're looking at each of these things pretty carefully. And I think the process has worked. And surprisingly enough, we're still at the very early stages. But one thing that I will mention, I understand the concern about the power of the recommendation is what I put down as a note. That would be something that's universal between both boards, that we need to determine where we're going to hold the line on the buffer zone. And you guys are working on that, so I know that's going to get resolved. And any applicant with a sufficient law team and civil engineer knows both sides of the equation, and they know they can request to work in the buffer zone under, the law. So we have to take kind of an approach on that. But I'm pretty happy with the process, and I congratulate Joanne for the rapid response on this particular recommendation. And the other part of the thing that I'm very concerned about is the process that's the way it's written up. So this would be my concern, is that we have to get stronger with the applicants to meet with the appropriate people in advance of their plans coming in, which is what the bylaw basically tells them to do. But the anxiousness of an applicant when in the process, and I can speak from experience on that, is that you don't want to do that. You want to just keep things moving as fast as you can. So I think it's just a question of getting a little closer to what we really expect from the applicant. And if we can all agree on this, call it the no build zone, call it whatever we want to decide between the two of us. And one final point is that the laws and regulations we work under does not preclude anybody from having a lot that's 100% inside everything, buffer zone, wetlands, whatever you want to call it. We only look at lots dimensionally, and if they work dimensionally on the very early stages. Then later on, we look at how those lots are constructed along a road. So in the preliminary phase, they could have two lots there, one with all the wetlands on it and one with nothing on it. And the second lot might be given away later or something. So it's a dimensional exercise. But I think the applicant really needs to get together with the conservation and the professionals at town hall very early, and instead of putting a plan in first and then asking us to tweak what we think is going on. So that's my summary. Sorry.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, we spent a lot of back and forth at the Shaker Mill. So the initial plan they gave us was not even close to what we ended up with, and so we need to do what you're saying, Ken.
Right. I remember when the Shaker Mill Pond stuff came in, and it was like a reverberation around town hall of how bad it was. That's all I heard. This is really bad. It's a bit. Wait a minute, we just started. So
Exactly.
Anyhow.
So Jess, do you want to?
And in those situations, it is also hard to judge as to, are the developers coming in with the worst case scenario?
Yep.
Knowing that, I'll work with you guys to get to where I really want to be.
Right.
Or is it truly that is what they actually wanted from the get-go? And, we'll never know that going in.
Just suspect.
Exactly.
Suspect. Jess, did you have some comments for us?
Me?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. I think one of the overriding questions has been, we've been working through this process, but the overriding question is, what does the planning board want and need from us that we can give? And then what are the limits of our power to give you what you want?
Right.
And and I think I can see the need for a more precise or more detailed recommendation coming from conservation. How we get there is sort of part of the crux of the matter. And what I've mentioned before is like a two-step process. But before I get to that, but the other thing is, in terms of how prescriptive a recommendation we can give you, question there is, as things currently stand with the bylaw as written, it's really up to what power does the planning board want to give us that has standing? And right now in the bylaw, we don't have any legal standing to make a prescriptive recommendation outside of our jurisdictional area.
Correct.
So, but in terms of what we could do, at least more now, would be, again, the two-step process, where my suggestion would be, first, we have to really make clear with applicants, with developers, that the two things I think conservation needs to begin this process, along with the conservation analysis, is one, a clear sense from the planning board of what is the overall size of the parcel, development parcel, and then what is the 50% open space, the minimum 50% open space. What is that number, roughly? And then secondly, then would be for the applicants, when they submit their conservation analysis, that it includes a breakdown in either acreage or square footage of different parts of the parcel. Here's this little wetland on the north side. That's approximately so many acres. Here's this little wetland on the south side that's approximately so many acres. The buffer zone around this on the north is about this acre. Breaking it down so that then when we do get to talking about looking at the plan in more detail, we have a realistic number in mind of, okay, they've got 50,000 acres that are priority, that we would think are priority, but your open space allotment is only 40,000 acres. Town can't require more than that.
If we have 40,000, it's going to be a pretty
Well, I
big.
know, I'm just throwing numbers out. But just to, because then in terms of looking at how we pick and choose, well, this part of the wetland or buffer zone is more important than this part of the natural heritage land that might not have any take possibilities for species.
Right,
So we could pick and choose, which is what we did do with Shaker Mill.
right.
So if we got those two pieces of information, then we move along like we have been, which is do the site walk, meet with the applicant, and prepare our blind recommendation that doesn't look at lot lines, and have that as a preliminary recommendation.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Jess, since you're on the topic, one of the board members has expressed the confusion, like, why don't you want to see lot lines? And since this is being recorded, I think it'd be nice to have a clear on the record statement of why that would not be appropriate for Conservation Commission to see the lot lines before they could determine the areas of concern.
Does Joanne, do you want to?
Oh, you bet.
4-step process, whoops.
Exactly.
So the actual conservation values of a piece of property have no interaction with potential subdivided house lots. And the house lot layout has no bearing on where the high conservation value parts of a parcel exist. And I don't know that I can say it any more plainly than that. The lot lines for a subdivision do not matter. They don't have any, what's the word I'm looking for, Jess?
You have no material bearing on the issue to be decided.
Absolutely none, zero. And for instance, if we take this OSRD subdivision that we're all working on right now, and just say the front part of the parcel was the high conservation value,
Mm-hmm.
would it matter where they plan to put the lot lines? No. Yeah, so that's why it just doesn't matter.
Thank you.
The other thing,
If I may have a quick addendum to that, just also, it's not really codified in the bylaw explicitly, but it's a traditional thing that Randall Arendt, the famous planner, developed a 4-step process to determine or actually come up with an OSRD design. And in the first step, which is identifying the important conservation areas, you intentionally should not even think about lot lines. So, I think the bylaw does make reference to the 4-step process. It might not go into a lot of detail about that. That's something we could try to do in regulations.
What's his name again, Mark?
Randall Arendt.
How do you spell it?
Arendt. And he actually gave a workshop in Harvard back last winter, right before everything shut down with the
You
COVID.
remember that.
And it was very good. He's he's probably one of the foremost experts in the world on this. And so he came up with this process that a lot of, towns in Massachusetts and throughout the country are adopting.
Right, and so right now, the guidance document that Mark and I worked on briefly before the first OSRD came through lays out this process.
Mhm.
The planning board has the ability to create a regulation that would make this process regulated. It would make it much more clear to the applicant. Right now, the OSRD exists as a bylaw, but there are no regulations attached to it.
I beg to differ.
Where'd you go, Ken?
Where'd you go?
Beg to differ and you left.
I went to get the subdivision regulations.
Oh,
So,
No, I'm talking about the OSRD regulation.
right, but you
I
made
mean,
a statement that there was no regulations associated with the OSRD, and that's incorrect.
Well, yeah, we have subdivision regs, yes, and then they go into a lot of detail. But what I think we're both referring to is something that's a little bit more specific to the design process, sort of a design guideline manual that has the power of regulations, and or how we actually do this, whether we do it as a design guideline that's sort of informal recommendations, or we do it as regulations that have a little more teeth. That I think is yet to be determined. But Joanne and I were working on this document that would sort of spell out the process in more detail following Randall Aaron's guidelines. And
Mark?
pretty far through it, but
Okay.
we didn't bring it to fruition. And now I think we're seeing a lot of issues with these recent OSRDs that will cause us to think a little bit differently about that.
Right. Actually, you know what? I cut George off when I started talking, so I'd like to go back to George if that's all right.
No, I'm good. You guys said what I was going to say.
Okay.
Just a quick
And
comment.
And I hadn't quite finished my process list.
Go ahead, Jess.
All right, it was just more that, we do our normal recommendation as we've been doing in the blind, and now that's been explained. But then I think there's a role for conservation to come back and look at the preliminary or whatever stage the layout for the developer is at that point, and look at that in light of what we've already decided are the conservation priority areas, and then get into what, the horse trading. And that's where having those numbers of what's the amount of how many acres are in the 50% that minimum has to be set aside. How many acres of priority that we've set as priority are we dealing with? And where do we want to then, within that rubric, pick and choose this area, this buffer zone to this wetland, but not this one as much. We did that a little bit with Shaker Mill. And
Yes.
at that point, when we did that, my suggestion would be that we do that as a joint meeting with the planning board. One question is whether we'd want that to be a joint meeting between both boards without the applicant speaking, or whether we want the applicant to be present or not. But I think at that point, conservation could answer a lot of questions coming from planning board members and vice versa. And then we both have a shared basis on which to do that, picking and choosing and looking at potential lot lines. And we could give you a stronger recommend, and then we could, after that, come up with our definitive recommendation.
I'd like to go back to what Joanne said, because it's perfectly correct. And I'm not so sure that what you said works, Jess. I think the emphasis really needs to be on the developer coming to you guys first and getting that, priority, high priority, middle, low priority, whatever you want to call it. And then lastly, as Mark knows, that 4-step thing, the last thing they do is they put the lots on. So if everyone respects the process early, then we may not have to do much of this horse trading. But the other thing to keep in mind is we don't have any control of the land that's coming in front of us. It's just coincident that it may be true that every process that comes before these will go through this process. But it's just coincident these three all had conservation issues and, had to come in with the designs accordingly. But some may have nothing. You're still going to make a determination on the land, even if it's a pasture, because they all have high priority of some sort and habitat of some sort. But it's going to be trickier with a curvy shaped pond or a curvy shaped wetland potentially than a straight out meadow and whatever the case might be. But I think the process really starts with the way it's written up, that don't do anything till you get that, that first step done, which is figure out where the priorities are. And then
But
lastly,
in reality, though, Ken, I think we've been finding that, particularly the most recent developer, they're coming into the process already with a layout in their minds.
Yes.
they do. Yeah. And that's why we have to teach you more about the OSRD and
Right.
what we expect in this town.
Okay,
You know
one
what?
last comment. That would be where one would think that having the power of a sort of regulatory power would say to an applicant, your preliminary application is not complete yet, because it's something that enforces they have to follow a certain procedure.
We have that authority now. We can reject it right at the beginning. If it's not, if Mark doesn't tell us it's complete, we can reject it. We asked the planner for whether he approves the application as being complete, and he writes it up that he finds that it is complete. But, you know, there's no, we can put more regulations on. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to point out that I think the applicant needs to do more at the beginning. That's all.
And if
Well, and
quick comment,
Jonathan, go ahead.
a quick comment is that I know I've only had experience 2 years, but my 2 years on the board, what I've noticed regarding applicants and when the issue of guidelines versus requirements is that routinely they ignore guidelines and they fixate on requirements. And I think if you think from their point of view, it makes sense. They want to say, where do I have to spend time and money? Well, guidelines, if it's not a requirement, it's not an absolute obligation. We've seen that they ignore it, even when it could serve their best interest, like it is suggested, you know, a preliminary just discussion. Nope, they skip it and they go right to the preliminary. I mean, you know, we see this all the time. So I would think that if we're thinking of improvements or changes in the process, we're going to realistically have to think about requirements and regulations, not simply guidance and suggestions, because they're ignored. They're just ignored.
yeah, and that was my point around having the 4-step design process for OSRD. The OSRD part of the zoning bylaw have its own regulation saying, you know, this is the 4-step process you have to go through. It's not a suggestion. It's not guidance. It's a regulation. And I couldn't agree more that these they happen to be guys, come in, they've figured it all out ahead of time. This OSRD process is completely upside down from what typical subdivisions,
Mhm.
and a lot of them don't get it. I have explained it to every single one of these 3, and they look at me and they smile and nod, and then they do what they're going to do.
Right.
But they all have come to our land use team ahead of filing with the planning board or the conservation commission. So they are coming at least to the staff.
Right.
They maybe not coming to the planning board ahead of filing or the conservation commission ahead of filing, but they are coming to sit down with Mark and I and DPW and fire and the police and economic development and zoning to say, this is what we're thinking about. What do you guys here in town hall think about this? So that does happen.
Okay.
One other thing that I think will help with that process, maybe making them take the requirements more seriously is, and Jonathan and Mark already know this, but I think conservation is hoping to pass an initial set of regulations either at our next meeting next week or the following meeting at the latest. That's going to include a no disturb zone for previously undisturbed areas, which is primarily aimed at developers, not at homeowners. But that would change. I mean, that will have an effect on how developers can lay out their lots and thinking about what's buildable and not. And so that will help planning board a little bit too, I think.
So just that would, in essence, that would be the prescriptive determination then, as opposed to a recommendation. Say,
Right.
look, whatever you guys arrive at as a regulation, to say no build or no or better, no disturbance within the 50-foot buffer, for example, and then for us, it becomes really easy. You know, it makes our job at the planning board much easier.
Well, and honestly, Jonathan, it makes the Conservation Commission's job much easier too, because
Yep.
the way the Wetland Protection Act interacts with its regulations and the jurisdiction that it gives commissions over various wetland resource areas does not include the buffer zone, except in riverfront, and that's only half of the riverfront area.
Right.
So I imagine with the current OSRD that's running through the boards right now, there might be a little bit of a blow up since they already have their lot lines or their ideal lot lines laid out. It's going
No.
to be a bit of a blow up when
Yeah, when this regulation
Right.
hits
it
the,
goes into effect.
yeah, and we're proposing 50 feet.
Yeah.
And yet we can't put in a regulation that amounts to a taking. So
Right.
we're also allowing for a, not a variance, but a waiver,
Waiver.
but at the sole discretion of the Conservation Commission.
Oh,
Feel free to mention that to anybody coming before the planning board related to this next week.
but the regulations would only come in force on applications that's submitted after the regulation is made, right? It wouldn't have a retroactive effect on applications already in process, would it?
Well,
They haven't come before conservation, right?
no, and they haven't submitted a definitive to you.
Exactly. So it's still early.
That's why we're hoping to pass this next
Yeah,
week.
that's something for this particular subdivision. I think we need a quick legal question with town council.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
I think the filing of a preliminary plan gives applicants a little bit of protection from at least zoning changes
Yep.
in the interim period. I'm not sure if it covers the wetlands stuff, though.
I don't think,
That's a good question, whether the regs you're working on that could be adopted soon would apply to this definitive plan. I'm not exactly sure, but it would certainly apply to any future preliminaries coming in.
well, it's going to apply
Yeah.
to any notice of intent they deliver to us for this project because
Yeah.
they haven't applied. And we've published our public notice hearing for this coming Thursday for adopting these regulations. So we can get our draft in shape enough that the commission can vote on it on Thursday. It becomes
Effective that day.
that day. Yep.
But I think all of us support the idea of that you guys getting the regulations now that you've got the wetlands, local bylaw and whatnot. So that's a good thing. I did want to focus on one more thing though. Remember that this is difficult, but the OSRD does not have a minimum frontage requirement other than state law, which is 20 feet, and does not have a minimum lot requirement. So the mathematics of the lot size is different than the unit count is different than whether that lot is going to be in wetlands or not. I can simply move my line back out of the wetlands buffer zone and have the lot out of the wetlands and go away from any jurisdiction.
Mhm.
So there's mathematics, there's a lot of mathematics involved here. So the step, there's no way of knowing in the preliminary plan beyond the negotiation what that final plan is going to really look like. We already had this happen where an applicant increased the lot size after we decided on a preliminary plan, and now we've had them decrease in the definitive. So this is example 3, but I don't want anyone, I'm trying to think this through, that there's the lots that are shown on a preliminary plan in their size can be decreased in size and still make the same number of density. The houses may get closer and all the things, they could pull it right out of the wetlands. But there are two lots that are A&R lots on Washington Street that if they go in with A&R lots, which it looks like they're going to, those will definitely go to you guys, and because they both have jurisdiction there. But I want to caution you that just the preliminary plan and the size of those lots is a work in progress, and can be mathematically changed and still comply with OSRD.
But and I think that's the reason for that stipulation in the OSRD, right? Is to again allow more land to stay untouched,
Right.
while still providing the developer the ability to get the density that he wants. So I don't see that as a negative, Ken, unless I'm missing it.
No,
Maybe you explain.
It's not a negative. It's
Oh,
not a
okay.
negative. It's just a cautionary statement that by concentrating on the lot lines we see now, that may not be what a lot line looks like and still be able to comply with OSRD. And what you said is absolutely correct. The intent was to keep as much open space and increase density and compactness and potentially stay within the big picture, which is our need for houses that are, different types of neighborhoods and things like that, instead of big lots, and
Right.
on and on it goes.
Yep.
But it
So-
just, mathematically, they can potentially get out of the buffer zone and come up with what.
Based on what I've seen so far, they've got a ton of options.
I just want to ask, have Joanne and Mark had their opportunities to say what they would like to say? I know everyone else had a chance to have their
I'm done.
minute. They've contributed their comments, but I wanted to make sure that each of them had a chance if they wanted to express their priority concerns.
Yeah, pretty much. To me, I think a very important thing is timing, the
Mhm.
timing of all these steps. And, we have to do it with the, state law in mind. But Jonathan, you mentioned the 45 days, 90-day thing. So basically, we just have to make sure that we meet those, and that anything we do to coordinate with the Conservation Commission has to take all those, both timelines in consideration. But there's certain steps like the density bonus step. With this subdivision, for instance, the base number of lots is like 19 or 20, but they want to go up to 28 lots with these density bonuses that they would need a special permit for. So I think that step needs to be done before the definitive plan is filed. So the applicant's not doing like Aho did with Shaker Mill Pond and doing like two or three different iterations of a definitive plan. That we need to know before that stage that. And there may be other things that we could try to resolve before the definitive plan stage, which have, tripped us up in the past. So, that basically, I think timing is the most important thing.
Thank you, Mark. Joanne?
Well, and I think another time when we have more planning board members with us, I want to go through how the Wetland Protection Act and its regulations color what the Conservation Commission can and cannot do. And I also want to do the same with the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act and the Natural Heritage Program, but I don't think this is the time to do it. I would like to say that I feel like the Conservation Commission has really stepped up and given the planning board what we understood the planning board to want from us in terms of a conservation recommendation. Jess talks about the subordinate clause in the OSRD bylaw, that the Conservation Commission right now, the way your bylaw is written, has an advisory role, not prescriptive, merely advisory, because you all, the planning board, are in fact the authority here. It's your decision. And if you would like more backup from the Conservation Commission than you feel you're getting, I think all you have to do is ask. And but you need to be very clear about what it is that you want. And I think you can always count on the commission to help you have the best projects that are possible to have. And at the end of the day, I think that's all of us want, is
That's right.
for there to be the best possible project. So without putting too fine a point on it, I think the ball is in the planning board's court a little bit. If you want something different from the commission than what you've been getting, you just need to decide what that is and then ask us and know that the commission will give it to you if they can, jurisdictionally speaking. Commission, does that sound fair?
It does sound fair.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have a question. Jonathan and Jess, are you going to continue working together, continue your dialogue, refining the process?
Well, I hadn't planned on it. There's nothing in preventing us from doing so. I guess my general feeling is that I actually agree with Joanne and Ken in their statements that essentially the fundamental bones of this process are good. And I also agree with Jess that that each body has the potential and the power to use to create regulations that would simplify the process, and Conscom is already engaging in that. And I would encourage my fellow board members to do the same. For the thing, like I like the idea of of outlining what the 4 steps are and making them obligations, not just suggestions. I think is wise. So in that light, I hadn't planned on continuing. Certainly, if there's interest, I would be willing to do it. But I think really, to be honest, the most important part of this meeting is bringing us together.
Correct.
That's it. That's the big thing. Because I don't think that the bones are in danger. I think we're both doing great jobs. I think that the projects we've overseen to date are better because of the work both of our parties have done and contributed to them. They're better projects. They simply are. And I anticipate the same with the latest one on our table. It will be, by the end, it'll be something better. And in that light, I think that we've accomplished it. I think we're airing our concerns. We're hearing each other out, and we have some concrete ideas to follow up on.
Good. I would like to just add one other thing so that all of you know that, and Mark Archambault, I'm going to put words in your mouth right now, that Mark and I work very, very well together. We work very closely together. I would say it's unusual the day we don't talk to each other about something that's going on with one of our projects. So if there's any concern on the part of the board and commission about communication with your staff, I think you can take that right off the table. Is that fair, Mark? Yeah.
Turn the mute off, Mark, and tell us really.
Yes, Joanne is correct. And yeah,
Mark has something. Oh, I'm sorry. Mark P has something he wants to say.
No, I'm just saying we got, well, actually 3 minutes now. Great.
Yeah, this is a meeting we're not going over by 1 single second. So
No, so as far as I'm good. I'll let everyone else speak if they have anything more to say. No?
I want to thank you guys for getting together with us, and I just think it's great because this to me shows that the OSRD process is working because we're working with conservation, so it's right there in front of us.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we apologize that it took so long, but the logistics made it so.
No need to apologize.
Yeah.
well, we learned a
I think
lot.
it's good too, and just, again, the lines of communication are open. We just got to coordinate amongst ourselves. So.
It's a pleasure,
quick comment,
working
John?
with you. Yes.
Do you remember that maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, I think you and your wife actually crossed paths with me on top of that habitat trail? I was the fool on the hill.
Well, and after I was talking with you and I'm going,
that's me. That was me.
I know. After I left, I thought, well, that's Jonathan. He's sitting up there. No, I would have walked right by you if you hadn't have said something. That was really, that was great. What a great place though, huh?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, quick comment. A couple of, this is not appropriate for me. We need to go, but there's a couple of logs that have fallen on the trail that we got to alert to DPW. I got to take pictures and send it to them. We need to get.
I already did. I already asked.
Thank you.
I haven't been out there to double check they actually did it, but
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other very quick comments?
I got one last thing.
Please.
I think the planning board definitely needs more education on the NHESP
Yes.
and conservation restrictions.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work on it, but I know the other folks don't have enough time for that. So we should be bringing in an outside specialist to speak to us about that.
So conservation commissioners, if you would be willing to share your issues of Massachusetts wildlife with the planning board, I've been trying to get 5 more from Fish and Wildlife. I think that would help them as much as I hope it's helped you understand the natural heritage MISA process. And if you get them to me, I'll distribute them.
Okay. Yep, very good. By the drive-in window in your
Yep,
office?
the drive-in's open.
Okay.
I'm going to ask the two representatives of town hall, is there a formal way to end this or that needs to be done to close this?
Boy, I just think each board should just say adjourn, make a motion to adjourn, right?
Well, your
A motion to
planning
adjourn.
board doesn't have a quorum,
No.
though, so you
Oh,
actually,
yeah, we don't have a, right.
All right, so
Right,
we
so-
could just bow out. What about you guys?
John, I think you
Well-
need to call for a motion to adjourn, though.
Exactly. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, it was moved by George Bacon, seconded by Mark Phillips. We'll do a roll call vote. Jen, Amaya, how do you vote?
Aye.
George Bacon, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jess Gugino, how do you vote?
I
Mark Phillips, how do you vote?
aye.
Chairman votes aye. We are adjourned.